$80 billion disappeared from public view in a single fiscal year, and the American government did not want you to know about it. That number, $80 billion, represents the confirmed declassified figure for the United States intelligence community's black budget for the year 2013, released only because a man named Edward Snowden handed a document to journalists at the Washington Post. Before that leak, the American public had no idea that their tax dollars were being funneled into a parallel financial universe, one operating completely outside the normal congressional appropriations process, hidden inside larger defense bills, disguised as mundane line items, buried in bureaucratic language designed specifically to prevent you from asking where the money went. But here is what makes this story even more extraordinary. That $80 billion figure, it was only for the intelligence community. It did not include the Pentagon's own separate classified programs. It did not include the special access programs that exist in a category so secret they have their own internal classification system. And it did not include the programs so black that even the declassified document about black budgets could not acknowledge them. What we are going to do today is follow the money. Using actual declassified financial documents, Congressional Budget Office reports, Government Accountability Office findings, and historical procurement records that have slowly made their way into public view, we are going to build the most complete financial picture possible of what your tax dollars have funded in secret, what they were supposed to cost, what they actually cost, and why that gap between those two numbers should alarm every single person watching this. In 1981, the United States Air Force told Congress it needed a new stealth bomber. The program, then classified, was projected to cost approximately $500 million per aircraft. Congress approved funding. The classified development began. 17 years later, when the B-2 Spirit finally entered service and the financial records could be partially reviewed, the actual cost per aircraft had reached $2.1 billion. That is a 420% cost overrun on a single airplane. But the per-unit cost explosion only tells part of the story. The original classified proposal called for 132 aircraft. That was the strategic requirement. That was what the Air Force said it needed to fulfill its nuclear deterrence mission. At the projected $500 million per plane, Congress was looking at a $66 billion total program. As costs ballooned, the order was cut. First to 75 aircraft, then to 40, then to 21. The program was so expensive that buying the original quantity became mathematically impossible. The United States ended up with 21 bombers when it needed 132. And those 21 bombers cost $44.7 billion total. Here is the taxpayer mathematics that should make your stomach turn. At the original projected cost, 132 aircraft would have cost $66 billion. The United States instead spent $44.7 billion and received 21 aircraft. For nearly the same money, America got 16% of what it was promised. Now, defenders of the program will correctly point out that the B-2 is a remarkable aircraft, that stealth technology proved far more complex and expensive than 1981 engineers understood, and that geopolitical changes after the Cold War reduced the strategic requirement. All of that is true. But here is the problem that no defense of the program can escape. The secrecy surrounding the B-2's development meant that Congress could not conduct meaningful oversight of the cost escalation as it happened. Government Accountability Office investigators who attempted to examine the program's finances in the 1980s reported being denied access to fundamental cost data. By the time the overruns became undeniable, the program had so much institutional momentum and so many contractors across so many congressional districts that cancellation was politically impossible. The secrecy did not protect national security. By the mid-1980s, Soviet intelligence had a general understanding of the aircraft's existence. What the secrecy protected was the cost overrun itself. Hiding the price tag from the American people until the point of no return was not an intelligence function. It was a budget management function. To understand where the money goes, you first have to understand how it disappears from public view in the first place. The mechanism is remarkably elegant in its simplicity and remarkably troubling in its implications. The Department of Defense submits a budget request to Congress every year. Within that request, buried inside the research, development, test, and evaluation accounts and the procurement accounts, are line items that appear to be ordinary defense spending. But certain programs are flagged for restricted access. Their actual descriptions are classified. Their actual costs are often classified. What Congress votes on, in many cases, is a number attached to a code word that most members of Congress are not cleared to know the meaning of. The 2013 Snowden-leaked black budget document, formally called the Congressional Budget Justification for the National Intelligence Program, is the most complete public picture we have ever gotten of this parallel financial universe, and the numbers it contains are extraordinary. The National Intelligence Program requested $52.6 billion in fiscal year 2013. The CIA alone requested $14.7 billion. The NSA requested $10.8 billion. But these were not the complete figures. Below those agencies, in a category the document called the Military Intelligence Program, sat another additional $27.7 billion that was accounted for separately. Combined, the confirmed classified intelligence spending for a single year was $80.1 billion. To provide context for that number, the entire annual budget of the FBI in that same year was $8.1 billion. The entire budget of the Secret Service was $1.8 billion. The entire Drug Enforcement Administration ran on $2 billion. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives operated on $1.3 billion. All four of those agencies combined, responsible for the majority of federal law enforcement inside the United States, cost $13.2 billion per year. The classified intelligence budget was 6 times larger. But what the 2013 document also revealed, perhaps more importantly than the top-line numbers, was something intelligence historians had long suspected but could never confirm. The document contained a section describing what the intelligence community called spending on the enduring challenge. That phrase, in the bureaucratic language of the black budget, described the cost of maintaining secrecy itself. Classifying information costs money. Maintaining secure facilities costs money. Background investigations cost money. The compartmentalization of programs so that individual workers cannot piece together the full picture of what they are working on requires redundant systems, redundant personnel, and redundant oversight structures that serve no operational function except to maintain secrecy. The document suggested that a meaningful portion of the intelligence budget, analysts estimated between 8 and 12%, was spent not on gathering intelligence, but on hiding the fact that intelligence was being gathered. Not every black budget program represents waste. Some represent something more complicated. Genuine technological achievement funded through mechanisms that made meaningful cost accounting nearly impossible to reconstruct. The Lockheed Skunk Works in Burbank, California, built some of the most important aircraft in American history: the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, the F-117 stealth fighter. These programs were not just classified, they were developed under financial arrangements that deliberately bypassed normal procurement rules. When the U-2 project was authorized by President Eisenhower in 1954, the entire program was funded through the CIA's secret reserve accounts rather than Air Force procurement channels. The initial budget was $22 million. The CIA paid Lockheed $35 million for the first 20 aircraft, a modest overrun by the standards we have already discussed. But the financial story of the U-2 program does not end there. Because the program remained classified for decades, and because its funding came through intelligence channels rather than defense procurement channels, the full life cycle cost of the U-2 was never subjected to the kind of congressional scrutiny that would have applied to any normal aircraft program. When the CIA eventually commissioned an internal financial review of the U-2 program, declassified in 1998, the investigators found something remarkable. The total cost of developing, producing, operating, and maintaining the U-2 fleet from 1954 through the program's first major phase ending in 1970 came to approximately $1.4 billion in then-year dollars. Adjusted for inflation, that is approximately $14 billion in today's money for an aircraft that had an initial budget of $22 million. Now the U-2 produced intelligence that shaped the Cuban Missile Crisis, that mapped Soviet military installations, that provided American presidents with information they could obtain no other way. The investment arguably justified itself many times over in strategic value. That is not the point. The point is that the financial structure of the black budget made it impossible for any outside body to track where the money was going in real time. By the time any accounting was possible, the spending was complete, the outcomes were fixed, and the only available judgment was retrospective. An auditor arriving after the fact can tell you what was spent. They cannot tell you what should have been spent because the entire competitive and oversight framework that produces efficiency in public procurement was absent. The SR-71 Blackbird tells an even more dramatic story. The program's development cost was classified at multiple levels simultaneously. The aircraft itself was acknowledged. Its performance specifications were classified. Its actual unit cost was classified separately from its total program cost. And its operating costs, which were extraordinary because the aircraft required specialized fuel, specialized ground equipment, and maintenance procedures that were themselves classified, were buried in different budget accounts entirely. When researchers finally assembled a complete cost picture for the SR-71 program using declassified documents obtained over decades of Freedom of Information Act requests, the total program cost from development through retirement in 1998 came to approximately $11 billion in then-year dollars. The publicly acknowledged figure at program retirement was under $6 billion. The classified operating accounts had hidden nearly half the true cost. In 2018, something happened that should have produced wall-to-wall media coverage, congressional hearings, and public outrage. Instead, it received 2 days of news coverage and then largely disappeared from public consciousness. For the first time in its history, the United States Department of Defense underwent a full financial audit. The Department of Defense controls approximately $700 billion in annual spending. It employs nearly 3 million people. It owns or leases more than 500,000 buildings and structures worldwide. It has existed as an independent department since 1947. It had never once been fully audited. The 2018 audit was conducted by independent accounting firms, 18 of them, simultaneously. They examined every major component of the department, and when the results came in, they were, even to people who had spent their careers studying defense spending, genuinely shocking. The auditors could not account for $21 trillion in financial transactions. Now, that number requires immediate explanation because it is so large it seems impossible. The $21 trillion figure does not mean $21 trillion is missing in the sense that it was stolen. What it means is that the Department of Defense's financial records contained $21 trillion worth of transactions that could not be traced, verified, or matched to documented purposes. Money moved between accounts, equipment was logged and then unlogged. Assets appeared and disappeared from inventories. The paper trail, or in modern terms the digital trail, was so broken that auditors could not reconstruct what had happened to resources representing a sum larger than the entire United States national debt at the time. The audit failed. The Department of Defense became the first and only major federal agency to fail its inaugural audit. Defense Department officials responded by noting that the audit had revealed specific areas for improvement and that the process of fixing the financial management systems would take years. That is accurate. It is also a remarkable understatement given the scale of what the audit found. But here is where the classified programs intersect with this story in a way that almost no reporting at the time captured. The audit examined unclassified financial records. The classified programs, the special access programs, the waived programs, the programs so sensitive their budgets are not shared even with full congressional committees, those were not subject to the same audit procedures, which means the $21 trillion accounting problem exists in the portion of the Pentagon's finances that is available for examination. The portion that is deliberately hidden from auditors was not included in that already catastrophic accounting. The Government Accountability Office has been publishing a list called the High-Risk List since 1990. It identifies federal programs with particularly serious management and accountability problems. The Department of Defense Financial Management has been on that list continuously since 1995. 29 consecutive years of being flagged as a high-risk financial management failure. Chapter Comparing Costs Across Decades. The Pattern.